We'll look at the events of the 19th of January, 1966, just over 40 years ago. And if you listened to the Pirates in those days, you will have known that when you turned on the radio on the morning of the 20th of January, there was no Caroline South. You could see it, especially in East Anglia, because it was sitting high and proud on the beach at Holland Haven, just down from Frinton-on-Sea. And on board, amongst others, Dave Lee Travis.
I was out on the deck. It was late at night, and I'd already been in watching television. And the television pictures were so bad on this particular night that I thought, I can't stand it anymore. What I learnt later was that the programmes we were trying to watch on television were actually flashing messages to us on Radio Caroline to say, excuse me, you're in deep trouble. But of course we couldn't see it because the weather was so bad and the aerial was all over the place. I remember going out onto the deck. I think that I was one of the first people to notice that we were drifting. Certainly one of the first of the English crew anyway. I was out there and I can't remember who it was with, but two of us were looking at the lights of Frinton, which were always in a given position at any one time, and they seemed to be bigger on this particular evening. And I said this much, and so, "No, you're joking, don't be silly." And I went back in, I said, "Here, come and have a look at this. Look at those lights. Aren't they bigger than they were last night?" So, of course, we thought the lights were coming towards us, but in fact it was us going towards the lights. And then of course, the now famous, anchor chain braking jobby happened, and we came aground at Frinton Beach. And it was just outrageous because we were genuinely so lucky. We could have been in some awful trouble because we landed, as luck would have it, between two sea walls. If we'd have gone 100 feet either way, and the weather was not going to be choosy, if we'd have gone 100 feet either way, we'd have hit this side-on and the ship would have broken up and people could have died. I mean, it's that serious. We were dead lucky. We braced ourselves ready for the grounding. We hit the ground, the whole ship tilted over, and you've no idea what it's like being in your home and watching a fridge fly across the room at you. That was what was happening. And then, of course, the breeches buoy was set up. We all ducked as this rocket was shot at the ship. And guess who came off first and landed in the arms of a waiting photographer? Old Blackburn. Cup of tea, towel over his head. Yes, that was his game, all right. Yes, it was an interesting night, that to say the least.
DLT, Dave Lee Travis, and his memories of the night of the 19th of January, 1966. As he mentioned, Tony Blackburn was there.
I mean, we went aground. I mean, everybody used to have this joke about the fact that one day we'd go aground, and one day we did, actually. There was a guy called Norman St. John on the boat, and I remember I went to bed early because I was doing the breakfast show, even in those days. And I think it's about, I don't know, it must be about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Norman St. John came down and said, you must get up because we're going aground. And I thought he was joking. And then the captain of the boat came down and he said, we really are going aground. And I remember going up onto the boat and we thought we were quite a way out, actually. That was about a 10-4 scale and the waves were crashing over the boat and everything. Something we were moderately used to, actually. And I remember the captain shining this massive great sort of light that he had. And literally it must be about 20 or 30 yards away, there were just people walking along the seashore. And I remember him saying, Mayday, in a very, very quiet voice. And I thought, that's a bit too late. And there was a sort of crunching noise, and we just ended up on the seashore in Frinton. The most exciting thing that's ever happened in Frinton, I think. And the guys, the people who rescued us, they shoved this, I forget what you call it now, it's a rope across the boat, and they hauled us off. And we went to customs and everything, and that was it.
Carl Thompson from Chelmsford was one of the ship's engineers. I was speaking to him just a couple of days ago, and he was reminding me of all of the names of the disc jockeys that worked on Radio Caroline.
Tony Blackburn, Keith Skews, Dave Lee Travis, Tommy Vance, who's sadly passed away, Roscoe. There was newsreaders such as Norman St. John. There was disc jockeys over from Australia, Graham Webb, Tom Lodge, whose great-grandfather had something to do with the invention of radio years and years before. And the list went on and on and on. Up on the North ship, of course, there was the northern DJs that played for the northern audience. Tony Prince, who went on to do...
Just many of them household names.
Mike Ahern, they were all the household names as of now.
And, of course, Johnny Walker was in Caroline.
Johnny Walker was there as well, yes. Yeah, so we put the world to rights several evenings.
But, I mean, it must have got a bit boring there. You were broadcasting to the nation with millions listening, but you're stuck on this little boat just off the coast. There's not much to do other than you check a few dials.
Well, there was a lot of maintenance in the evenings to carry out. You had to keep the station running, so there's a lot of... It wasn't this mouse jockey that I see in front of me now. It was a proper disc jockey who had tape machines, and they, over the use in the day, used to get dirty. So we had to clean them in the evenings. We had to maintain the transmitters because it was a sold atmosphere. And there were certain problems that we needed to do there. So it wasn't... And then you had to eat and you had to sleep. And we used to play cribbage and various board games or watch the TV. A little bit of TV out there. And that was the day. But I wouldn't say we were ever bored. You know, there was always something to do.
You certainly weren't bored 40 years ago. Just run us through what happened on the 19th of January, 1966.
Oh, Lord. We thought there was something wrong when we had to keep on adjusting the TV aerial. We had an aerial on a sort of a remote directional pointing device. And we kept had to adjust that, and it was going on. DLT went outside, and it was blowing a fair gale. He went outside and went up to see whether there was something he could do with the aerial. What, I don't know. I think it was one of the programs that he wanted to watch, so he who wanted to watch it most went out to try and fix it. But then the Dutch crew came down and said they thought we were drifting. The weather was foul. You couldn't see too much of the coast where they took the bearings from. So George Saunders, who was the other engineer, and myself, we went down and turned the transmitter off because we thought we were inside the 3-mile limit. So we switched off, and that was running the Caroline countdown at that particular time. We'd never got finished with that at that particular time. So we switched off, and that was about, I would think, about 7 o'clock-ish time. And we didn't really think, we were just watching the shore, what we could see, and the ship was moving in a funny fashion. It wasn't the normal thing, it was rolling a bit. And then about 11 o'clock-ish, we suddenly saw we were coming fairly up onto the beach because the captain turned on a searchlight and you could see along the seawall. You know, the ship had been moving around. DLT had come up and said that the cans of Coke had come out the fridge and the fridge was rolling around. And they'd been down below and woken up Tony Blackburn and Tom Dodge because they had early morning calls. And you wouldn't, it was a job, so being responsible, if you were going to work, get up at 5 o'clock to do the work, you'd go into your bunk early on. It wasn't a crash bang, it was a sort of a gliding up onto the sands. But then it really did start because the waves had nowhere to go except to hit the side of the Mi Amigo, and there was spray all over the top. The Coast Guards by that time had followed us along. We didn't know where we were. We knew we were up on the beach. And they fired some lines over to the ship, which the Dutch crew and myself, or the Dutch crew picked up, and then everybody turned to haul the ropes in, and we tied the rope up under the bridge. And then we proceeded to come off the vessel. I think it's 40 years ago, but I believe Tony Blackburn was first, followed by Norman St John. We then got Graham Webb off, DLT, Patrick Starling, and then George Saunders, and then that left, I think there was left me and Tom Lodge, and I looked at Tom, and he looked at me, and I said, well, you go. And we lifted him over and got him into the breeches buoy, helped him in. And then I went to see the captain, just said all the UK crew is off because that's just left the Dutch seamen on board. And did he want me to stay? And he said, no, you can go also. So then the problem started because I was helping and Tom Lodge were helping everybody else in. And Muggins is left up to try and get into this breeches buoy. And I think one of the Dutch crew came along and gave me a hand in because you had to crawl up over this high lump of steel work and then work your way in. But I know I didn't come ashore with both legs in the breeches buoy. I came with one in and one partly in sort of stuff. Lost me slippers, lost me socks in the surf as we was coming ashore. And then I'm walking up the beach, and the one memory I have is thinking to myself, they've laid the red carpet out. And it wasn't until we got over all this shingle and sand and up the seawall and looking down to the ambulances and police cars and other vans down the back of the seawall, there's 6 to 10 inches of snow. And it's freezing cold, barefooted. And we went down into the ambulances, and they took us along, and I believe it was Frinton police station we were taken to. And we were then gathered together, just interviewed by the customs, And from there we were then taken to, as distressed seamen, to a store somewhere, I think it was in Walton, where they gave us dry clothing. And it was good quality care in the 60s. I only threw the shirt away 4 or 5 years ago.
It lasted well.
It lasted well. And then from then on we went to, we were taken to a hotel which opened up in the middle of winter. No, I hope the people are still alive and living, but it was freezing cold in the hotel in the middle of winter in an English hotel in those close seasons.
Well, suddenly all these blokes were turning up they hadn't expected, so you can't expect them to have the fires alive, for goodness sake.
But we had a cup of tea and a scotch.
Yes.
And the scotch landed up on my bill at the end of the day. And the next day we then went back and got some gear from the vessel. We went on board. We came off, and then we had to wait around because they were trying to tow. A tug had come across from Holland, and it was trying to lift the Mi Amigo off the sands, which I think was 3 or 4 days before they actually got the thing off. And then they wanted a volunteer, looking at certain people, to sail with the vessel to Holland. So I said I'd go, and Patrick Starley said he'd come with me. So I went out to the Mi Amigo and rejoined, and with the tug tightening, towing us, off we went to Holland, which we were told would take about 15 hours. Mm-hmm. The only trouble was, during the night we sprung a leak, and he had to slow down to 1 or 2 knots, and it took us 3 days to get to Holland.
That's Carl Thompson, who was an engineer on the Radio Caroline ship when it beached at Holland Haven. But the story doesn't stop there. Jean Millichip got in touch. You remember there, Carl, talking about the policeman that took them to the police station, wrapped them up, gave them tea. It was Jean's husband.
I came down in the morning and his wet uniform was on the kitchen floor with some very nice fur boots that I'd bought him for the Christmas present. He'd actually taken part in the rescue of Radio Caroline. And he was very cold and wet, as you can imagine. But all went well, and all the DJs ended up in Walton-on-Sea police station, and I have got a photograph somewhere of them all. Particularly, I think it was Dave Lee Travis wearing a police helmet.
Did he say anything about what he had to do?
Yeah, he said they were called out, and it'd been blowing a gale, pouring with rain all night. So they had like a pulley line that they brought them ashore on with like a chair attached to it, I think. Mm-hmm. You know, like on a cable car, I suppose. And as they brought them ashore, they obviously got quite wet going into the water.
Yeah. And so did your husband, by the sound of things,
as well.
Yeah,
he did. But these fur boots, I'd bought them for him for Christmas. They were really nice boots, and he shouldn't have worn them on duty, really. And they never did dry out. There was a salt line around these boots, and they were never any good after that, you know.
That's a shame, eh?
Yeah, but I loved Radio Caroline. I used to listen to it every single day because it was so close to us, you know.
That's Jean Millichip, whose husband was PC Millichip in those days and helped to rescue the crew from Radio Caroline. In fact, Jean was saying that if any of his former colleagues just happen to be listening this evening, she'd love to hear from you. So get in touch with me here at Pirate BBC Essex at the Chelmsford studios of the BBC for the Eastern Counties, and I'll put you in touch. Also, another request as well. We heard from DLT, Carl Thompson and Tony Blackburn as well.